the guy came and he was trying to make that meal for him. He thought he was supposed to know, like, it wasn't the fish. It was, I remember they went to the other chef to get the chicken because the other guy wanted Manuel. He liked
right.
He came in and he stuck his foot in the chicken.
The duck, that's right.
And the car broke down, so he started beating it with a stick.
Yeah, I love that. Beat it with a stick. It's great.
Hey, I have to give you a sound thrashing.
He goes away, comes back with a branch on his leaves.
They made an English version of it for a while. I think it was called Something by the Sea, or I can't.
Hey, where'd you get that shirt?
The circus last year. It glows. All this stuff like absorbs light, and then in the dark it glows. Is that right? Yeah. First, I didn't realize that. The first time I got it home, it was sitting on my bureau. I was like, "What is that thing? Is it still?"
Hey, it does. It really does. You know, all the white.
Yeah, all this. Oh, that's protected.
Yeah, it sure does.
It tripped me out, hanging up in my closet. I was like,
"That's me." There's a place down there that sells reproduction 18th century furniture in kit form, and they're having a big sale, and I want to go down and check out their kits, see if it's something I want, and if it is, then buy one, bring it back, build it.
what?
Windsor chair. We want to get a set for the dining room.
Finally, frisbee. Big truck coming.
where you want to. Unless they sent you, I told you you could go.
Yeah. Okay. We are wrong. And so when did you move over here?
I think I've been in now about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I think I had. One of the photographers from up here came down once, and I had one of the jets on the stove, and I had turned it all the way off. And he said he was inside, and he got sick from the gas. But I didn't smell it, too much. So when he came back up there, he was telling them about, because I was heating with the gas too. My stove, 2 stoves, they stopped burning, and I was eating with that and electric, so they called me and said, I told them I was going to move on the Saturday. So they said, why don't you come on over here? I said, we got a bed, you can stay until Saturday, and we'll move you. So.
Well, Mr. Levy, I want to ask you about the old place over in Harmony Lane, and I want to ask you about your life there and about your family. Tell me all about your great-grandfather. What was his name and what did he do?
Well, I don't know too much about him, great-grandfather. He died young. I mean, before I was born, I guess. And I hear my grandmother and my mother and them talking about him, but because he was a slave, and they give him that 8 acres of woodland, and he cleared it up, and cut logs off and trees, and cleaned it up, and then he cut trees and got lumber and built that log cabin.
That's right. He built a log cabin, and did you live in that log cabin?
Yeah, I was born in there. When I was born, mother too, 13 head.
What did that log cabin look like? Can you describe it for me? In a picture?
Well, I did have a small one. Somebody looked like to me got their hands on it, but I have one here that the school took 1950, I think. 1950 when they took, I think the school came down with the high school, and they came down, brought a busload to look at that cabin, and they didn't want me to take it down, but they condemned it.
Can you tell me what the cabin looked like inside?
Well, we just had logs, big logs across for the floor upstairs. Didn't have no like the ceiling is in here. Just only had boards laying on top of the logs, and had big logs for joists, and up in the gable end, well, they just had rafters running up, and they didn't have nails. They had a piece of hickory or wood. They made a pin out of it, and they bored a hole through the rafter, and they drove that thing in there to hold that rafter together. The man, the gas and electric man, he tore down one house there, out there. He said that house never would have fell down. Couldn't tie pieces. When the rafters had those pins in them, didn't have nails. They made round pins like a boat, and drove them in there. And that was the rafters that went together to hold the roof up.
Can you describe the rooms and what was in the rooms?
Well, the rooms was just walls. They didn't have nothing but just the logs around inside. They didn't have it sheeted up like they do houses now inside. Just plain wall, and where they had the plaster between the wall. It wasn't no cement at that time. Just they say they had lime and stuff like that. But the walls was was all smooth, and then Mother would whitewash it upstairs. Didn't paint. They wouldn't do too much paint at that time. They used more of that lump lime they had. They don't have it now. Stuff that wouldn't rub off, and put blue in it, any color you want. And they done that once a year.
Was it comfortable in the summer and in the winter?
Well, cold in the winter. We didn't have a wood stove, and downstairs. So we'd go to bed. I would have had a fireplace too. Big log fireplace where we had a pot, big fireplace like that. You could lower logs in, and then this fireplace we had a rod over the top, the iron hooks. You could hang a pot over top this blaze to cook. But most of the time, summertime we had out summer kitchen off from the house to keep it from being too hot. But in the wintertime, you go to bed in the heat, warm, and get up in the cold. Water sometimes be thrown in the buckets. But you kept warm because they had a great big old fella mattress. They had two mattresses. They had summertime, they had a straw mattress. They'd dump all the old straw out in the summertime, time faster than wheat, and it washes out, and then they put new straw in it, and they put that on the top, and the summer would be cool, and put the pellet mattress on the bottom. And when we went to school, the same thing. We didn't have no heat in the school. We had to make the fire. Sat around the stove to study lesson. And by the time the school got warm, time for us to go home. And had to walk a mile and a half. Didn't have no snow plows. Had to walk, break your way through the snow. From west around the valley, Homley Lane, around Stevenson Road, now they call it.
Where did you go to school?
Up there on Stevenson Road, the public school. Didn't keep me in there long. I was a big boy. I went third grade, and then they took me out from school and put me to work. I went to work over on Whiskey Bottom Road, where they got all those houses on that right-hand side coming up on Whiskey Bottom Road before you get to the lane turned down to me. There wasn't no houses in there then, nothing but woods, pine trees and things. So they cut them down with power saw, and then I used to dig them up. Yard, me and what's the other coming home, old man was on it, and that white fella, he was supposed to be the foreman. Mm-hmm. And he tended to the farm, and I used to do the clean up the stumps, mm-hmm. and that clean up the land.
What kind of work did your father do?
He died when I was young. I never didn't see him. He was a cook. I learned he was a cook.
You know who he cooked for?
No, I never. I trade to the people he left long with to New York or Philadelphia with. That's where he died up there.
Tell me about your great-grandfather again. Now, his name was Benjamin Snell, right? Uh-huh. Now, did your grandmother ever tell you any stories about him?
No, she never done too much talking about our great-grandfather. Tell us how the boys, how strict he was on girls and the boys, you know. Whatever he said, she agreed. She said, no, you can't go nowhere. And he said, you don't go, you don't go. You couldn't just ask her and go to him. He said, what your mother say? Your mother said, Mama said, I can't go. She said, well, that's what we mean. You can't go now. Even though they got grown, great big boys. They only had one key to the house. You come in, time they go to bed, they went to bed early. And you couldn't come in an hour at night.
You say you had a spring down in the woods?
Yeah, but that's where everybody on the place was 5 families, and that's where they all got water from. It never was dry. And on the deal, they still got water, I think. They condemned it because my cousin below me there, he dug a hole for an outhouse. And I think it was too close. And you don't know which way the vein was running underground, towards the spring or what. And when they took it away and they had to test it, why they came back and said the dogs had been playing in the water, but then there wasn't dogs because the one dog used to go down there. Yeah. But I fixed the gate to it so he couldn't get in the spring. Uh-huh. And I don't think it was the dog, but I think it came from that outhouse underground, that water. Yeah. After I put the outhouse over top of this hole, and we dug about 4 or 5 feet deep in the water. You don't know which way the water was running. It wasn't too far away from the spring, but 25, 30 feet away, maybe 100 feet.
Tell me, did your grandmother tell you any stories about how slaves were treated? Slaves like my great-grandfather?
Yeah, Charlie, he'd tell a lot of stories about how they come around late at night. But time, just thought the wood stove would be getting cold, you know, and you weren't allowed to, no gun, no powder. They'd take the drawers out and hold them over the stove and see whether, and the part of the thing would sizzle like powder, you know. Didn't allow you to have no gun.
And did they used to buy and sell slaves around the area?
Yeah. Used to come down to a place called Peace Crossing down next to Washington. There was a creek down there that I used to work on the state road, but I don't know whether it comes in there yet or not, but they used to go there every Monday morning and carry them down there and auction them off like to do cattle or hogs. And then they wanted all big people, big women or big men. This man pays so much for you, and the other one so much, and they load you on the ship. And they would, when the boat pull out, they'd be waving their hands back to mother, or they'll fall down some ants or something. You never see them no more. Send them to another plantation.
What kind of do you have any kind of idea what kind of work that your great-grandfather did as a slave?
Well, he had the hard work, cutting down trees, and we didn't have no machine. And I don't think that I'm talking about they cut trees down would be that high, great big trees, and they didn't have nothing to lift them on. These ox carts, they didn't have mules, they had oxen. And these big men would have to get a stick on the side, you know, 5 or 6 men in this log, I don't care how big it was. They had to lift it up and load it on the cart. You couldn't come up with your hand. He'd be standing with that whip. They say he'd cut you with that black snake whip, that good old black snake whip he always carried on the back. Can full of whiskey, drunk all the time. Call him nigger, go on nigger, lift that log up. You lift it up and you lash you with that whip.
Who were the pat rollers, and who were they, and what did they do?
That's what they call pat roller. Just call them pat roller. They were men that rode around late at night. See, everybody wasn't set free at one time. And they give you a pass. Those that was free, they give you a card with your height and your name and skull or whatever you had on your hand, and how high you was and your weight. When you was caught out, you'd have to show that to them. If you wasn't, they'd take you into custom, like they do soldiers. They had that pass, but they'd done a whole lot of hard work, cleaned that place down there. It's a shame for those people that work hard like they did, older people, and clean it up. And some people right be buried even down where I'm living on. They beat you half to death and they make somebody dig a hole. They just put you right in the hole anyway. Bury you. Nobody said nothing about it. Now, yeah, my grandmother said they'd have daughters in the house, the good-sized girls, you know, nice looking. They'd come around and say sometime to them, well, you get your clothes ready and come over with me. And they'd take them, carry them to their quarters. Then you have a wife and your daughter there too. And part of the time, that's what I think I hear, so they would get children by her and his wife too. But she never come back to you. You never get her back. You know. Boys and men, young men do that. Come and draft them like that and take them off to the quarters to work and clean.
Do you have any idea what kind of work that your great-grandfather did after he was freed?
Well, he cleaned up that land and farmed it. He wasn't no woods. He worked it. There was an old mule, horse, and he made a living right down the farm. Raising tomatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, mashed potatoes, cabbage, and all that stuff. They raised everything on that property. It wasn't no bushes. Mm-hmm. The tree come up that high. They didn't tell you cut it down. You had to grub it up. They worked it. All that place was just clean. It was out there on the yard, you all around that whole area there where you had that. Well, it was. They give him 8 acres, and they give his sister, his daughter, 2 acres and a half. His cousin, she got like, I think he gave one of his, I think it was Amblite Snell, I think he gave him a half acre. So then that took 3 acres off, 8, so left 5.
Let me ask you, what did white men mean when they called somebody a good nigger or bad nigger?
Well, if you was a good nigger, he meant you a good worker. A good worker. If he call you, say you're bad nigger, that nigger bad, he meant you were bad. That's what they meant then. But if you was good, well, he said that Negro way, good Negro, good worker.
When did your family first come to that land and that house?
So a log house?
Yeah.
Right after they was set free. After he was set free, he came in and cleaned up. I don't know where he lived. He might have lived in the quarters until he got the house completed. He was a good slave. He was a good worker. And all that land, all the way in, all that land in there from where I live, clear back to number 1. It belongs to slaves. Slave, one man only. And I guess when he cleaned, they let him stay there in the house and stayed in the quarters where he were, where they used to stay, when he was a slave, till he got the place built. And after they built the log cabin, then he moved in that, and he raised a family.
I see. And let's see. Talked about that. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you about. In the old days, when there was no refrigeration, how did you keep food fresh in winter?
Winter? You didn't have that word, but not that back in my time. Winter, it would get cold enough to keep anything. We'd kill hogs and hang them on the pole. 2 minutes after ham on it, it'd be just hard as a brick. And they preserved. They didn't have to worry nothing to put putting tops on them like they do now and seal them up. They put them in a big crock and tie them a rag over them like pears, apples, and put them upstairs in the building. It was cold enough up there to keep them. If they wanted something, they'd go up, take a bowl, dish you up, and get them out and bring them down to serve them on the table. Out in the meat houses, why, and meat was just hard as a brick. They would cook the sausages, and some of them would cook sausages, and they'd grind them up, and then they'd cook them and put them in the jar. But they didn't do too much putting them in jars because the jars would freeze and burst. But they could put it in a pan like a pack, made them up around, But they didn't have to do all that. They could let them eat out, and it's hard, be this hard as a brick. In my time, when I started raising hogs, I had hogs, I had 20-something head there. Mm-hmm. And I could put them out in that outhouse. And you'd go out there any time after I got done with smoking, we called it. One time a day, people used to put in salt and water and salt on it, brine, and let it stain there and take it out and hang it up. But we used to put in the salt and let it brine, put sugar curd salt on it, and then we'd take it out, hang it up, and then we'd smoke it, hickory wood, and sapback and apple to make it sweet like. But the oils last they got during my time, sometime I didn't have to do that. I just rubbed that sugar cured salt. It had pepper and all the seasoning in it. All you had to do to take the meat, but the meat had to be soft. And just rub that salt on there and around the knuckles where you cut the legs up, the leg off, you'd have to stiff it down around that bone to keep from the caving. And in the end, lay it out of the way, and then you could turn it over and do the other side, and you could let them lay out on the board in the shed. Then after a certain length of time, we'd take them, hang them up, then we'd put a pan in there and make them for smoke. And that's smoke them for a day or two, and you got that smoke meat.
Did you also used to keep vegetables and fruits and things outside during the winter?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, apples and turnips, they had a kiln that you see some along, you go down the roadway, you see these round things like a tent. Well, they take apples and turnips, especially turnips and potatoes. I think it was turnips and potatoes or something like that. Apples, you know, they round them up in a kiln, make them a round steeple to it, and then they put straw on top of it. Then we'd throw dirt all on it, or that much, and cover it up with dirt. And it would stay out there, and then when you wanted to go to get some, you'd break a hole in the side the sun come up. And you run your hand back, and then you could get them out, and they'd be just firm as you could be. That's how they kept that kind of stuff.
Like early refrigeration, isn't it?
Well, they didn't have no refrigeration. Well, they, after in summer or something like that, come that ice box. Man, you cut ice off the creek, or made ice houses, and the man come around and serve you by big blocks of ice and put it in the box. Milk, you carried it down to where the old spring used to be, and had a box there, and you put your milk down in there, and the water would come out the spring. That would keep it cool.
What kind of foods did you raise in your garden?
Well, they raised cabbage, string beans, lima beans, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, orange potatoes, and, black-eyed peas, and corn. They raised most all, anything that you could name. Lettuce, beets, radish, anything that they raised, that's what they raised. They never had to go buy nothing.
Now let me ask you, for the things that you had to buy, like maybe some clothing and maybe some foods that you couldn't grow, where did you used to go to buy those things?
Well, there was very few stuff they didn't had to buy, like food. The only thing they bought was flour. And of course, a lot of people that didn't raise stuff like that, they had to go to the grocery store. They used to have to go to the grocery store. So they'd have to go there and buy it. But most of the people, like my grandfather and some of the other men, they raised most of their stuff for their family. So they didn't have no money much, and they wouldn't have to go out and buy the food. They have it already. One of the time they bought tea and coffee and sugar.
And where was the closest grocery store?
Well, Savage and Law. Savage and Law, then was the closest place.
And where would you go to purchase right? Mm-hmm. Where would you go to purchase things like clothing?
Well, in Law, they had dry goods store, then was Blocks, and Beals, and the old store. They had most any kind of clothes you want to buy, these kinds of spenders, and most of the men would spend corduroy pants, overalls, long underwear, and women then used to wear shoes, button-up shoes. Shoes with buttons on them.
You could buy those kind of things there?
Yeah, you could buy all that. If you didn't want, well, you didn't have money. Some people used to go to town, city too, but you could go to Laurel and buy that kind of stuff, clothing.
Now you could go into Laurel and do that. My understanding is that, or rather Savage, my understanding is that Savage wasn't such a friendly place.
No, not for colored people, Negro. You go there and wasn't really none of the old people. They get after and run. You have to run to get away from them. Go about across the bridge, go by this mill where it was a cotton mill. And you come across the bridge and they'd be up at the windows, the old mill was there yet. And they'd be looking out the window and sometimes they'd hollering at you, nigger, black face, shiny eye, next thing you know, they throw one of them big spools trying to hit you. But if you're with the old people, why then they didn't bother you. Then if you got to running, you get over on the other side, half-grown men, they'd be sitting over there and they'd get after you. And you can go there by, well, after one boy shot one of them with a rifle, it got a little bit better. But they was very purged. They didn't bother once you in the store. You just buying stuff. And the longest kind of time, late years, before they started building houses there in Savage for colored and white, they still got that bunch of Ku Klux Klans. Some of them is in Savage in different places there yet. They have that. And they put a washroom over there, and the colored people started to go in there to wash clothes, and they got after them, didn't want them in there doing it, so they had to break that up. But it's still a bunch of Ku Klux Klans. Just ain't been too long. Right over in North Law, they call it above Law, over in the place they call North Law. There were a colored family lives. They never had no trouble over there. Went over there and burned a cross right in the boy's yard. So they, 2 weeks ago. So they don't know what reason it was. The people lived around, the white folks lived around there, and they was crying and said, we never had no trouble there before.
Now, how come it was that they wouldn't, in Savage, they wouldn't bother the old people much, but they would only bother the young people?
Well, most of the old people, they worked for them people around there, them stores, and them working for the people that around there was well thought of and wealthy. And they wouldn't bother them older people, because if they do, they'd tell them. They would want to know why you bother so-and-so or something. But they didn't bother real old people. At least women and men didn't go too much over there. Law was another place for fighting colored Negroes. You go down there and up electric car used to come in from Washington all the way to Law, right up to Main Street. You come in now in that car from Washington late at night, you better get off down the low, because this bunch of drunks would be up at this cabinet, used to be a bar. And when you got off there, you had to fight. They'd be there ready to jump on you. My cousin, my aunt's husband, he broke a knife off in 2 or 3 of them and bit them. And it quieted it down for a while. They'd pale them off a fence and anything, he'd beat you half to death. Because you couldn't have it one way to come out of Law unless you come old way and go across the old wooden bridge. But if you had to go down Main Street, you had to come down number 1 and go up that. They'd run you all the way down there. And you're trying to get away from them. If you by yourself or 2 of them, it would always be a bunch of 4 or 5 of them drunks, Merchants and whiteheads laid around there and believing nothing but fighting colored people, Negroes. And then some of the others, they done the same thing. Then when they had a ballroom there, they had one side of the colored and one for white. He was my cousin's husband. He got shot in the ballroom down there. All of them left him down there, and all of them came home. He wouldn't come when they came. So they had no one got away from down there before the report come out that his name was Nan Cooper. He was a Cooper. Dad shot him. The fellow shot him, got right dead in the trough. He run with his wife. And we don't know what happened. But anyway, this fellow killed him. Then they never high sheriff make believe could never find him, and so he was O'Brien, his name was, but we never did catch him. Came for court and nothing.
And that was in Laurel? That was in Laurel?
Law, yeah.
Oh. How long ago was that?
Oh, that's been a many days ago. But a boy, but I can remember Mama coming home home from up at the window, and my grandmother and mother telling them that man Copeland got killed.
Tell me, did you ever used to, in the old days, you ever used to travel into Baltimore to Washington?
Oh yeah.
You did? How would you get there?
On train. But you had to ride Jim Crow way. Colored people rode in one in the back. And white people, they would ride in a separate car in front. You couldn't ride. It's just like it was in the South. You discriminated. You ride the back. And a little small department car on the back. And the buses was the same way, running from Baltimore to Washington.
You call that the Jim Crow way?
Yeah, that's what they called the Jim Crow.
How did it get that name? How did it get that name?
I don't know. Well, I guess it got to separating the people. Colored people rode one side of the car and bus, and you had to ride in the other part.
Let me see. Talked about a lot of things here. Talked about a lot of things. I know what I wanted to ask you. What did you do just after you left school? What did you do?
Well, after I left school, got out of school, I went, as I say, they took me out of school and put me to work on them stumps. 50 cents a day. I didn't get away, they just took me out of school. The white men, they would tell my grandmother, that great big boy, too big for me to go into school. Didn't want you to have no education. Put him to work. I got something for him to do. Go on farms, thin corn, cutting down corn, plowing. Well, it was the same way I learned down in Virginia during World War II. They said when those white fellows come from Virginia, they said they couldn't even read the name. They worked on farms, they never went to school. And you wasn't compelled to go like you do now. Now you have to go, but then you didn't have to go. If you didn't, your parents, they wanted to send you to school. You didn't have to go.
Speaking of the war, I understand you did not serve in, let's keep this quiet, you did not serve in World War I. How did you escape serving in World War I?
Well, from 18 to 45, I was in the draft. And when my papers came, and they had been in the post office, you had to visit the post office every day. That was the law. But I hadn't been down there, nobody, so they put your name up in the post office that your papers were down. If you don't come, they wouldn't send after. So anyway, I got a notice that my papers was there, and my aunt, she picked them up. So I got the papers, and mother, she was reading them. They were, I think the next day or 2 days I was to go get ready, go up and register. An officer signed. Then I missed it. Going in, then World War II, I was too old for World War II.
Are you sorry that you missed the war?
Well, in one way I am. In a way I ain't, because maybe I wouldn't have been here now. I said, the war then, of course, it's worse than now than it was then, because they got so much other stuff now, shooting out there. At Fort Meade, they had plenty of those big tanks and big guns, they used to be down there. I worked at Fort Meade when we was building it over. We built World War I, worked to World War II. And they had them big tanks with them big guns on them, tearing down them old houses and showing how they could run and turn them around quick and kill people up quick, a lot of people. So maybe if I hadn't been alive, I'd been like some of the people today was in it, but they over there and water reading, arms off, legs, and then later in World War II too.
Let me ask you,
work you say that you did most of your life?
Well, most of the work I done was like labor work. I went to Spaz Point and I worked railroad. I worked Beano for a good while. I thought it was fun out there riding on that thing called, what I found was hard work. Didn't pay much either, so I worked there a while, and then I came off and I went to work on the farm. I stay all the week. Some of the places, you had big houses, but they wouldn't let you stay in the house. You'd sleep out in the barn in the hay or feed in the kitchen. You put a piece of meat on the table, over fat meat, and you didn't eat. Put it back on the next day and you'd have it. And one time he kept putting it on, and I got in, carried it down to the barn. When the dog was down there, I thought the dog would eat it, and he grabbed it and carried it back towards the house. I had to run and catch it and take it away from him. And carried it down there so it's take away and throw it away. She was the wife, his man, our husband, Mr. Yeager, he was a nice man, but his wife was mean. Now she's come to me and asked me, like,
what kind of work did most of your neighbors do too?
Well, they done work in stone quarries, breaking rock and 20-pound slate hammers. They worked in railroad, farm. That's the only kind of work we had for people to do. Of course, there was some people, I don't remember, I don't know, there was too many people at the government farm at that time.
Did any black folks have their own businesses?
No. No.
Why not?
I don't know. Didn't start my business. I didn't have no business. Now they do have barbershop and law coat. You sell most anything you want. But since they build the shop and some all the businesses out there, they must be in the law. Savage.
Do you remember what kind of work that do you remember what kind of work that
they done in the mill?
The black folks did in around the mill, in and around Savage?
Did none of the work around there. They was all from down Virginia. I worked at the mill. In later years, when the water, that really put water in Savage, we worked at digging sewer. We didn't have no machinery to dig it by hand. And we black folks, we worked there then. And part of the mill, on this new part, where the train come in, you pick up the cotton and stuff. We have to dig that out. So they put a load of cotton and stuff on. The old place there, you'd where now they sell antique stuff. The building that you up in Savage.
So blacks did find work in Savage then?
No, only the colored people, women. Then we had one colored man, he worked in Savage, he worked for a doctor. He worked for Dr. Lincoln. Under God's prayer, he worked for him. That's the only colored man I knew that had any jobs in Savage during my time. I know it was like, I don't believe you can come down around there. Well, you couldn't come down there and cut grass and do nothing there. Throwing stones and all this nasty things. But they didn't bother the women, they'd come down, and most women, older women, they'd go down there and work.
Tell me, what church have you belonged to when you were living on Harmony Lane? What was the church you belonged to?
I belonged to the Assembly Baptist Church. That's the top of that now. I got ordained. Down, I think it's 50 at the top. That's
you're a deacon?
Yeah. So to give me that we got plaque to give it to our wife for all the good labor. The church was organized in my home. It took 25 years for it to get built. It's crossed on All Saints Road, across 216. Where the Jehovah's Witnesses, Kingdom Hall, they used to call it. You got to go past that and go up on the hill and past one church, and then the next church gets into the Baptist church. But of course, all my older people, they were Methodists. They went to the Methodist church in Bacontown in Asbury.
Why was having a church like that important to you?
Mm-hmm.
Why was starting a church important to you?
Well, we split up from another church. The pastor was at Oakcrest, and the people were coming in at Oakcrest, and they was in the basement, and he wanted to go on top to get the next story. And he asked about the deed or something, and they told me, "We ain't gonna see no deed here." So then when he got his lawyer to find out about how it was all fixed up, and you know how some of these people do, and they can't do it to us now. And it belongs to 3 men. And they call it the Communion Baptist Church, but it belongs to 3.
And what kind of activities did the church sponsor?
Well, we had demos on outside.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Well, I said we had demos. They'd eat outside, and service inside, and Sunday school, and Bible class, and all that, and prayer service. We had that in the basement. But the church we got now, we still was in the basement, but we completed 8, 9 years ago.
Do you think that the church, that belonging to a church is important for everyone?
Well, I think it should be. It is, because if we had more people today, I think that none of us perfect. But if we had more people that church don't save you. You go to church all you want, but you got to be changed. And the only way you can be changed, the things that you used to do, you have to quit. Like slang and shooting, gambling and all that kind of stuff. You can't hold 2 people in one hand, and in both hands you got to have to let go one to the other. You got to cut off one to the other, but it's not too easy. You don't do it right away. And like we tell a lot of, we talking about some of that yesterday when we got a woman there, she's a missionary, and she was reading, and we don't stop all these things at one time, running around gambling after women and drinking liquor and staying out all night and all that kind of slang, saying anything, and all that kind of, you don't do all that at one time. Done a whole lot of things that they got now, we didn't have it when I came along. Like going to theaters, you had to go to Baltimore, Washington, and places where they have these moving hours, where all that kind of stuff. We didn't have all that kind of stuff around when I was a younger boy. Not out here, I had to live in the city. Churches are very important. I find today, we were talking, this woman preached yesterday about love.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, the lady spoke on love just in the morning, the Bible, speaking about we should love you one another. As Christ told us to love you one another, regardless of what color, what denomination, we should love you one another. And by doing so, that we learn to fellowship and be together like I'm up here. These people, they treat me just like they've been knowing me all life, so I've never seen them. But it's the way I carry myself. Anything they do, I already was taught me. Now
honest, respectful, not to find. I was Christian, and sometimes I went to the hospital and had prayers, homes. Some people's homes, you don't have prayers like that, and their family. And so church plays a big part. I mean, the church is the people. I mean, if we get the right kind of people, we got people in churches worse off than the people in the world. Tell me, why do you think black people and white people have had such a difficult time getting along with each other? Well, I don't know. It was just, I guess, from down from slavery, they had that, the younger people, you know, they were taught from the older ones not to play together. You didn't go to school together. And we went to the homes and worked there and in restaurants. You didn't eat in the pot, but white people eat, you had to eat over separate. You couldn't eat where they had in the pot they eat. And you go in a place where they had a restaurant, a diner. I worked at one. And the lady came through, her and her husband, this colored man was driving. This Cadillac came over to the inauguration, and they stopped at the diner. The lady sat down, the colored fellow between her and her husband. They all were breakfast. So when they got the stuff on the plate and got it served, he ready to serve, and they said to him, "Why, we don't serve colored people." Didn't call them niggers, we don't serve colored people. She said, "Well, what do you serve? Where do you serve?" And she said, "Can they get, what you get, can you get something back there in the bar?" And they said, "Yeah, I can get him cleared." So they got up and walked away from the table. She said, "I'm going to see what this one getting washed." And they didn't pay for no breakfast, they just left stuff on the table. Oh, boy, they went away from there, they just carried on about this one. They didn't want to eat just as Negro went. Some of the colorful Negroes come there, they used to tell them, when they tell them go in the kitchen, they used to, now we were in the army together. So we all stayed in trenches and foxholes together. So now we're back here, and we got to separate us. So, but in the army, when we separating to it, we all slept in foxholes, worked ditches, and made all them together. But I don't know why, but it was just in the blood of the older people, the younger people. It's just like the young people now. You see them when younger people at the school and things, they get, the colored people, they get along good with one another. I mean, they learn to be nice friends. Most all groups got a white colored boyfriend, and they got a colored boyfriend or something like, you know what I mean. But of course, some of them, they got mixed up, and they wanted to marry and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't improve too much of that. Of course, it's good looking for the Negro women too. It's plenty good colored Negro women, but I think some of it came back from overseas, and the foreigners over there. They brought back some of those women back to this country. And they first went over there. The white man told the foreigners that Negroes had tails like a monkey. And didn't want them to have nothing to do with colored people. But after they were there, well, they learned different. So they learned to mingle with the foreigners. And next thing you know, when they came back there, they come back. Some of them foreigners they brought back. Some foreigners, I know some foreigners married some colored girl. Sure. Came back. Yeah. What used to be so wrong? Why was it wrong that black folks and white folks were kept separate from each other? Why was that wrong?
Well, it was just like slavery, I guess, down
to the south, you know how it was down to that. The king them to come to with its application, and it was the same way it was here. We was no different in the south, because this is the first southern state, and we were separated from one another. And down to the south, that always was that way. Always that way. Further north you went, it was different. But you come to Maryland and go up to that little great good distance to get, because this is a southern state too. They had plenty of that church thing against one another, but I don't know why. And now we go to church together and eat together. You don't see no difference. I'm eating off your plate, I'm eating off mine. Your money is as good as mine, my money good as yours. But they couldn't see it that way, but it was just, and I think in the blood of the old people, and they just didn't allow, they children, they come up, you know, their parents brought them up that way, so after they got a family, they taught their children, I think, the same thing. And that's what kept us discriminating between the Negro, the colored Negroes and the white. But we used to have plenty of white men. My uncle, he sold liquor, and we had plenty of white guys used to come up there and lay around there for a whole week, out there drinking and gambling with them. But then when you went down and logged, that same bunch, if they catch you by yourself down there, they would be with them others, they have to jump on you.
Do you think things are better for black people today than they were years ago?
Oh, well, it's a whole lot better than what it used to be. You couldn't go in places and eat, you go to the back door and get it, and they hand it out to you, and you had to go somewhere else to eat. Pay the same money. If you wanted to go to a bar, they had bar rooms, you could sit in anywhere. They had one side for the colored, one side for the white.
Think about the possibility of having a black president of the United States.
Well, I don't know that. It may happen someday, but I don't know soon. Because nothing wrong about it. Nothing wrong. It's time for a change. It's like this about women. President. Well, maybe something never think about the president, some of these men. Maybe they go in there and be honest and fair. We got them in there now, you see how they all mixed and mangled up where they was hooking money and doing all this stuff. But they claimed they didn't know, the president don't know nothing about it. He's the one to know everything should run on, but they don't know doing. So I don't know, but it would be just like, I don't care what president you get in there now. If you get in there, you just don't be like Kennedy. They're trying to help them to do good. They killed him. And I think the same thing may kill it now. Okay, if a color, black man was much quicker. They may not. But they don't go the way they want to go. They have somebody to kill them. They just don't look like to me. The people, the head of the state don't want nothing straight. You know, they want everything to look like crooked. They think you run that straight and crooked way, and they got you reading that too until after a while, till the color pulled off. Then you find out how much this stuff they've been dealing with in other countries and giving money, but nobody knows nothing about it. Didn't believe it though. It's hard to say. It ain't hard to say either, but you got your own opinion about it. That you have the president, he ought to know everything that goes on. And there oughtn't be nothing signed and sent nowhere unless his signature is on it. Unless they do it undercover on the Northern like they're doing when they had that other thing. But they care who we put in there now, you know what I mean? You're going to have a hard time for a while, baby. It may have changed, might come in my time, the younger generation. But I feel sorry for the younger generation of people today is going to have a hard time because they've let so much that dope get in this thing, just cut the state country down. And you get children 18, say 8, 9, 10, 12. It's going to be a terrible time for them to live, to come to them things because so much stuff is happening. Killing the parents when they can't get what they want. The parents got money and they want a new car and they won't buy it. They kill them. Colored same way. Is it important that today's young people learn about the older people that came before them and what they had to say? Well, some of them, like they were telling me, Earl is nice. I was telling them, I said, well, they keep coming and interviewing me. They say, well, it's nice for us to get that, something that we didn't know anything about. We can read that and get some kind of understand how these things all happen. We don't know. But if somebody that came through that time, can get it, and they can get it put in the law, maybe you go to the book, or something you read. Well, you say, I want to get it, but like that. Saying bad things and doing bad things, that's what they do. But if you teach them something that's important,